as I understand it, when you came to Tasmania, it was very much about your focus on Pinot Noir as much as anything, and your family background, little known Glaetzer in Barossa, your dad Colin, brother Ben, very well known for Barossa Shiraz.
Yeah.
When you first arrived, had you any idea that you could do something with Tasmanian Shiraz?
I had no idea. I came down here for Pinot and Riesling primarily, and then my first vintage here at Frogmore in 2006. We also contract process clients' fruit for their own little labels. We had a small bar up the road who had a small patch of Shiraz. The grapes came in and I looked at them. They came in the middle of May. Barossa had finished picking in the middle of March.
Right.
So these grapes came in 2 months later, and I looked at them and tasted them and said, that's not Shiraz, And then 6 months later I saw them again in barrel, and I was really impressed with the savouriness and the Rhone Valley style that was coming out of this fruit.
Yes.
And I said to Alan, the chief winemaker here at Frogmore, this is pretty amazing. And he said, oh, that's nothing. Have a look at some of these old Marilla wines that he used to make in the late 90s back at Marilla. Again, Tasmanian Shiraz. And I was really amazed at how savoury and complex and interesting they were. As that's the style of Shiraz that I was really keen to explore. So 2008 I got the chance to start my own label, and I actively went out there and sought for as many Shiraz vineyards that I could get my hands on to make my own Shiraz. So my first vintage 2008 I made 250 cases, and that instantly made me the biggest Shiraz producer in Tasmania.
That's amazing. And you've got some pretty old vineyards, and we talked about it originally, a Tamar Valley vineyard and 2 vineyards in Coal Valley, but the Mon Père that's picked up the prize has been 2 Coal River and 1 Derwent Valley.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But old.
So very
quite old vines
for
Tasmania.
For Tasmania. Yeah, 1973 the Derwent Valley vineyard was planted with Shiraz. The one in the Coal Valley was planted in the early 90s, and the other vineyard in the Coal Valley in the late 90s. So, compared to the Barossa, where they, anything under 80 years old is considered a young vine, but for Tasmania, anything over 20 years old is considered an ancient vine, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's the fruit that came off that. I picked that in the last week of May from the Derwent Valley.
Yes.
And it was, all the vines had fallen off the week before. They had a frost, an autumn frost, the week before. So the vineyard,
lucky.
I went out there to taste the fruit, and it was bare. There were just the grapes sitting there, and I thought, oh no, I've lost it. But I tasted the berries, and there was such concentration of spice and savouriness, and it was amazing.
Which comes through wonderfully in the wines. I mean, there's a wonderful amplification of spice.
Yeah, the fermentation is really, as you say, it's amplified those characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's interesting. And last couple of years when I was in Victoria, and a lot of Victoria producers talking about adopting more of a Pinot Noir-like approach to Shiraz. So I think it's interesting that here in Tasmania, you came here focused on Pinot Noir, and with your Shiraz, you're getting that. I know Tim Kirk uses the phrase, a beautiful phrase, celebration of spice for cool climate.
Yes.
Shiraz. And do you see in fact an affinity between the two grape varieties?
Definitely. I mean, there's nothing special that I do with Pinot Noir that I don't do with Shiraz. I'm implementing more Pinot Noir techniques with Shiraz now, like adding stalks back to the ferment and things like that, keeping it on its leaves for longer. I'm understanding the fruit a bit more than when I first moved down here, and I was treating it like I would treat it with a Barossa Shiraz, which unless you've got that fruit intensity, it doesn't quite work the way so you have to find some other avenues to get that intensity of structure into your wine, and these are techniques that you use for Pinot, because Pinot Noir typically, if you make it in a modern Australian way, you miss out on that mid-palate structure. So there's these techniques that you can apply to enhance that. And looking at that, I thought, well, let's apply those to Shiraz.
And then something that you're doing both with Pinot Noir, because we've had a really interesting tasting of the Frogmore Creek components of Pinot Noir, with lots of experimental techniques and techniques that you're using in practice as well. One of which is co-fermentation with not the obvious white grape varieties. Well, it's not obvious to do co-fermentation with Pinot Noir at all, but with Shiraz you're co-fermenting with Pinot Gris. So Talk to me a little bit about the use of those white grape varieties and what they bring to the equation.
Yeah, so I started, the first co-ferment I did with Pinot Gris was 2006 in the Barossa Valley as a trial, and I was really impressed with the results. And then coming out to Tasmania, I think it was 2007, I thought, why not try co-fermenting Pinot Noir with some Pinot Gris? And Alan said, all right, we're going to do that, let's try some Chardonnay with Pinot Gris as well. So that was 2007. And in 2008 my own label started when I had some Pinot Blanc on hand, and I thought, let's try Pinot Blanc as a co-fermenter with some Pinot Noir, and that worked quite well. A bit hard to get my hands on Pinot Blanc every year, so Pinot Gris tends to be the main one that I use, well, the one that I use for Shiraz. But with Pinot Noir, we're using Gewürztraminer as well. It's quite easy to get a hold of, and just the results are quite spectacular in you know, the aromatics that it adds to the wines, and the velvety tannin structure that you get in there also.
And coming back to, especially for Shiraz, and obviously it has an impact on Pinot Noir as well, and we've seen the success at Domaine A with Cabernet Sauvignon. So in this part of Tasmania, it seems unusual in a way that because it's the furthest south, it is in fact the warmer, drier part of Tasmania. So that's very important in terms of your ability to produce a Shiraz being in this particular part of Tasmania.
Those varieties, yeah. The Coal Valley is, the Upper Derwent Valley Bushy Park, which is where the old vine Shiraz material is, the warmer summer, I think it's the warmest summer viticultural area in Tasmania, just because it's so sheltered and it's much more continental than the rest of Tasmania, so the overnight temperatures maintain quite a high degree, whereas here in the Coal Valley, you know, the ocean's 2 kilometres that way, so overnight temperatures drop quite rapidly, but we do have nice, lovely, warm summertime days. And if you get to the north of the valley, it's much more continental. So Domaine A up in the north, they get amazing ripeness in their Cabernets, whereas if you have a Cabernet vineyard, you know, a kilometre that way, then you're very, very lucky to get it ripe in most years.
And with Shiraz in particular, do you think that it's a wine that you can produce every year?
Well, since 2006 we've been making Shiraz, well, I've been making Shiraz here every year, and I've been happy with it each year. Obviously some vintages are more approachable earlier on than others. 2011, similar to 2008, it's slightly greener and probably take another year for it to mature a bit to show itself a bit more. But as far as I've experienced in Tasmania, you can do Shiraz every year in Tasmania.
Yeah.
Definitely.